This is your Unit 1 IEW preview. In these previews, I'm going to be just highlighting the most important key new concepts that we're going to be working on during the unit, just to give you a heads up so that you know when you get to that point in the teacher's guide, this is something I really need to pay attention to help my child. So for our school Unit 1, we are going to be covering in Excellence in Writing Units 1 and 2. So hopefully that it makes sense. In the first unit of IEW, your student is going to be learning how to keyword outline if they weren't with me before and don't already know how to do this. And then they are going to be retelling stories by looking at their keyword outlines. So this is a screenshot from a page in the theme book. It's explaining how we can use extra things in our keyword outlines in order to flesh out the details. It's basically, I like to tell the kids that I'm teaching you how to quote unquote cheat. They think that's fun. But so the rule for each line on IEW outlining is that you can only have 3 words. However, symbols and numbers do not count in those 3 words. And so we talk about different symbols that we can use. Here you can see, this is from the book, that we have some abbreviations. This means a lot or much. This is obviously, I don't know, what's there? It's a question, a king, a royalty of some kind. And then our traditional abbreviations that we use: small, large, inches. There is in Appendix 1 a whole list of these abbreviations, and your student can just make them up for themselves. So my rule of thumb is if it is not faster to make the abbreviation than it is to, or draw a picture. Picture can work too, as long as it's very simple. If it's not faster to do that than to write the word, then it's too detailed and it's not going to work. Now, you can allow your student to kind of play around with this a little bit, because he or she is going to figure out pretty quickly on their own whether this is going to work for them or not, because sometimes they'll get really fancy the first couple times, and then when they get ready to retell, they can't remember what that meant. And that's okay, because then they're learning by experience that, okay, next time I need to dial it down a little bit and get a little bit more simple so I can remember what I was putting down on paper. So try to avoid guiding them too much in that and let them just experience it for themselves. This is a sample keyword outline. This is for the Ant and the Grasshopper fable, and you can see that they used some symbols in here to help with the retelling. And you may or may not be able to make sense of this by looking at it, but the point is that the person who's taking the keyword outline needs to be able to use it at a later time to retell it. So that's the skill that we're trying to help our students to learn, and this will be transferable in many different areas and subjects over their lifetime. So this is a fabulous skill for them to learn how to do well. Okay, then we move into Unit 2 of IEW, still Unit 1 for our school. And in this unit, we are focusing mostly on how to use our checklists. So this is a very early checklist. You'll notice on here we've got structure, we have mechanics, and we have vocabulary. We do not have anything regarding style yet. This is just to get them used to using a checklist. One thing you'll notice in my course on the ones that I have redone is that it does not have this line item right here, because we are not going to always be turning in the whole shebang for every single lesson. You are welcome, if you are new to IEW, to use this from the theme book. It's very, very similar, but just know that this is not something that I require. And then the only other change on the new checklists for new families is that for vocabulary words, I say that they need to use 2 or more vocabulary words every time. So just know that if you're using the checklist from the book, you need to hold your student accountable to be using 2 or more vocabulary words. And when you're using vocabulary words, it does not have to be words from that particular lesson. It can be any vocabulary word up to that point. Do encourage your students to try different words because they tend to kind of get their favorites and they get a little bit stuck, but it's okay for them to use vocabulary words from previous lessons. Okay, and then there are 2 main dress-ups that we are learning this unit. One is the ly adverb dress up, and basically this is just using adverbs. The main thing that students sometimes get stuck on with this is that occasionally there is an imposter ly word. And an example of this would be the word lovely. It ends in ly, but it is not an adverb. And the way that I help them easily distinguish this is if you are in doubt, you can use this little format and see if it works. So a blank pen. This comes from IEW, and you will see it later when we are introducing adjectives. But they call that the adjective test. Will it fit into a blank pen? So if I were using the word lovely as the example that I used earlier, a lovely pen, does that make sense? Yes, it does. So it is an ly imposter. It is not an adverb. Now, if I tried to plug in a true adverb to that, excitedly pen, that doesn't make sense. Innocently pen. Nope, that doesn't make sense either. So if it doesn't make sense, then it should truly be an ly adverb. And if it does make sense, then it's probably an adjective, and you don't want to use it as an ly dress up. You can use it as an adjective dress up, but not an ly. All right, and then the other main dress up that we're covering in Unit 2 for IEW is the who, which clause. Now, in my opinion, this who, which clause dress up is one of the most difficult ones to master, particularly for younger students. They get good at it after they've practiced a lot, but it can require a fair amount of patience and a lot of modeling and a lot of re-explaining. So the way that we introduce this is that a who or which clause tells more about the person or the thing in the sentence. And in order to make sure that it's a quote-unquote legal who which, you need to be able to do the who which test. And what that looks like is that you cover up the who or the which clause and the sentence must still make sense. So here we have a farmer, comma, who's saying to his animals, comma, bought a mule. So if I do the who which test and I cover up who's saying to his animals, I need to read that without that. So I would actually have them physically put their hand over that and then read it. And that would be a farmer bought a mule. Does that make sense? Is it a complete sentence or a complete thought? Yes, it is. So that one works. Okay, but this one, and this one actually we can read this one too. A farmer bought a mule, comma, which pulled a plow. Okay, I'm going to cover up that the who which clause, which pulled a plow. I'm going to cover that up. A farmer bought a mule. Does that make sense? Yes, it does. So that is a legal who which as well. If we move down here and I read this one, a farmer who bought a mule. Now to us, we know that just rings off bells, sends off bells. No, that's a fragment, but it might not to them. So you have them cover it up. Is that a sentence? Yeah, I think it is. Okay, well, let's try it out. Let's cover up that who, which phrase. We cover up who bought a mule, and we read a farmer. And you ask them, is a farmer a complete sentence? Oh, no, it isn't. Okay, so that doesn't work. So let's look at the next one. A farmer who sang to his animals bought a mule. Okay, we cover up who sang to his animals. This is the one from before. A farmer bought a mule. Yes, that works. Okay, now with this, it might seem like they're not going to get stuck on that. That's not that difficult. But what ends up happening is a lot of times, particularly the kids that are really into writing, they want to make this really flowery. And they make that clause really good and long, and it looks like a sentence, and it might even kind of sound like a sentence. So your job in modeling that and encouraging them is to have them cover up, even if it's a really long clause, make sure they're clear on covering up that whole clause, and then read it and see if it's a complete sentence. And that should keep them mostly out of trouble with this who which clause. And this is something that we will practice again and again and again. So don't worry if your third grader in particular is struggling with this, because they will figure it out. All right, so that is pretty much the crux of the main new learning that we have going on in Units 1 and 2 for IEW. And as I explained in the previous tutorial, your student, if they were with me last year, might be starting off with a checklist right at the beginning where they are using that ly and that who which. So they might know what it is, and you might not until now. So now you should be up to speed with your student and you can help them along. The other thing I want to mention, particularly for this unit because it is new, is with that checklist. I mentioned this in the other tutorial as well, but in IEW, checklists are either complete or they're not. So when you're looking at your student's checklist and you're assessing whether or not it is complete or not, you need to make sure that all of those items are underlined within the draft, and double check that what they say is an LY or what they say is a who which is truly a legal LY or who which. So you're not just checking to see if it's in there that they say it's in there, you're also checking to make sure that it does meet the criteria for that particular dress up. And if it doesn't, your job is to help them find a place where they might insert it and then help them brainstorm what they might do to make that draft complete. So I hope that that helps. Be sure to reach out to me early and often if you have any questions. I'm happy to help, and have a great time with Units 1 and 2 IEW.